We have come to the final session, literally standing in between you and lunchtime. I'm going to briefly ask the panel to introduce themselves. I am Chrissy Dube, and I'm the facilitator for this session. I'm from Good Governance Africa. I'd just like to start with Lebo Online, just to check that you can hear us. Lucia Online, sorry, just to check that you can hear us, and please do introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Lucia Stanislas. I'm actually joining from Atlanta, Georgia, where I run my business. It is a social innovation hub, and it includes a line of services and a product that I'm developing to measure social impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia, for that introduction. I'm going to ask Lebohang Zulu to introduce herself as well.
Yes, my name is Lindiwe Zulu. I am... Who am I now? Yes. I'm a citizen, and I'm also a person who's wanting to share my own experiences, having been in the journey in the past 30 years. Before that, in the liberation struggle, then a free South Africa. I think the country has invested a lot in me for me to be able to share those experiences with people who are willing to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindiwe.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Darius Rasool. I'm a director at DP World. I look after marketing, sales ops, and commercial strategy. And I'm quite pleased to be here. I think as DP World, we've got a keen interest in enabling trade, and obviously this topic is close to our hearts.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Advocate Pria Hassan. As you can hear, I hail from the legal profession. But for my sins, 30 years ago, I established Women of Africa. We operate in the sectors of energy, petrochems. We're a supplier to DP World. Thank you for that. They're big on women empowerment and development. I have a construction energy. We have a logistics division which moves cars. We have a healthcare division. We just bought hospitals, a wellness company. We're now taking care of our people, and a construction division that builds homes for women that are in citrus farming. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. As you can see, we have a diverse panel with Lindiwe from the political and policy perspective, as well as Lucia from the job creation, business and women empowerment perspective, Darius from the transport and logistics perspective, and of course, Advocate Pria from the legal, business, corporate and women empowerment perspective. So my first question to the panel is, briefly and in your view, what are the current challenges Africa faces regarding trade and investment as a continent? Lucia, can I start with you online?
Sure. And trade and investment, I would like to use one of my examples, since I'm case study, since I'm bringing the women empowerment perspective. So we have a project that that has the purpose of training women in tech so that they can get better jobs right after school. So there is a need on one side. There is an incentive, but there is not funding. So funding is one of the challenges. Even though we see that the demand for job creation, for quality education is great, we don't have funding, especially when it comes to creating social impact, when we are inside of the when we want to include the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the gap in acquiring funding is even greater. So that's one of the challenges that I have identified. The second one, even in the context of this project that I'm developing, is infrastructure. This project is supposed to be implemented in Angola, that's where I'm from originally, and in other Lusophone countries or Portuguese-speaking countries. But because of the lack of good infrastructure, like good internet, they're not able to connect the girls in that case. the women in tech, they're not able to connect that amongst themselves to exchange ideas, to continue their learning journeys. So these are some of the challenges I have identified, and I'm willing to hear from the other panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. Lindiwe.
Thank you very much. Let me start from just my recent trip. I just came back from Mozambique yesterday because they had elections in Mozambique. And I think starting from there for me is about issues of peace, security, and stability. If we don't have peace, security, and stability in any of the countries in the region, in the African continent, that is a big challenge, because you can talk about all the infrastructure, you can talk about the trade that is possible between the countries, you can talk about the systems, but if you don't have peace, security, and stability, that's where I think we need to start and ensure that this continent overall is a peaceful continent. The second issue for me is knowing each other. I think that South Africa, unfortunately, and South Africans in particular, were locked in for a very long time by the system that did not enable citizens to travel. I'm not talking about travel, we talk about England and all. I'm just talking about getting into something and going to Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland, just Eswatini around you. If you are a people that do not know each other, that do not understand our cultures, our values, our everything, it is a problem. And I think all the other things that have been raised actually by the previous, by Lucia, all those things become even more complicated when people do not understand each other or do not know each other. I went to Mozambique and I visited one of the museums in Mozambique. And what did I find? I found a history that is very much interconnected between ourselves in the 1800s to the 1900 beginning. But how many of our own know about that? And how many of the other side on Mozambique know about that? Maybe the Mozambicans might know more because of historical factors involving how Mozambicans were forced into coming into South Africa to work in the mines, to work in different places. So it's automatic. Even today, you go to Mozambique, they're still looking forward to going and finding a job in South Africa when there are opportunities in their own area. So for me is 1, peace, security, and stability. 2, knowing and understanding each other. 3, appreciating the capacity and capabilities among our own countries. 4, understanding what are the opportunities. You're talking about trade. What are these trade opportunities that we are talking about? What are the things that Mozambique, Botswana, and others need from us, and what is it that we need from them? And then lastly, also is for me in particular, it's about the issue of women and the empowerment of women and enabling women to participate in the very economy that we are talking about. Systems are important. Opportunities are important, but most importantly is to people understanding of each other, the knowledge about each other, and then the coordinated. All the rest of the things really, in my view, they will fit in very well if we started with understanding ourselves. Who are we? What are the opportunities that exist among ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you.
Clap louder. I mean, I couldn't disagree with anything the previous 2 speakers have mentioned. And what I thought I'd do to add on is maybe just provide a bit of context to some of the stats. So when you look at global trade and you look at what Africa's sort of contribution towards that, you're looking at single digits, 3%, the number most recently quoted. So that's almost insignificant when you look at global trade and that context. When you look at intra-Africa trade, so of all the trade volumes, Africa is responsible for, we've got 16% of that in intra-Africa trade. And to put that into context, for a market or a region like Asia, that sits at 59%. Okay, for Europe, it's even higher, 68%. Okay, so when we look at those sort of dynamics, we've got a long way to go. And I think when we start to talk about agreements like AFTA, those go a long way in terms of taking some of the barriers out. But Lucia touched on some key barriers, such as, for example, infrastructure, which is a lot of where we play as a logistics company, and that's those ports, the road, and obviously the rail. And I think rail becomes critical on the continent in actually not only decarbonizing, but also providing efficiencies from a time perspective. I think, yeah, that's just some of the context I wanted to provide in terms of those challenges. Let me just delve a little bit deeper into the topic or the theme around infrastructure. I think it's twofold. One is the hard, which I've touched on, ports, roads. I mean, we talk about, Lucia says she's from Angola, to give an example. They've got about 15% of the actual tarred road. Luanda Port is a key port into providing access into the DRC. And a significant portion of the road infrastructure is actually not tarred. This is critically important on the African continent, as almost 90% of our volumes and cargo move on roads at the moment. So that's why I say rail becomes quite important. So that's the hard infrastructure. And then some of the softer infrastructure as well, something along the lines of customs processes, customs modernization, and importantly, skills training, logistics skill training. The reality of it is trade actually thrives on strong logistics infrastructure. So with all of these agreements in place, they mean nothing if we can't actually move the products from point A to B. Yeah.
So let me speak from a women-owned perspective, and then I like to start with a story. When I started WA, I needed to understand how trade worked. Having a legal background meant nothing. So I decided to go into the streets of Zambia. I remember entering Chingola, and I found that there was absolute chaos. Darius is 100% right. If you understand the logistics grid and how it works, trade becomes very easy, especially if you know the people in the right place. But it also requires an understanding of Africa. Now, how Zambia works was very different. Very little women were involved in mining itself. So in order to get myself going, I invested in Women in Mining Zambia, and we actually mined copper concentrate out of Kasempa. Now, if you know Zambia, Kasempa is actually not accessible. So we then learned how to work with transporting copper concentrate outside of Zambia into an area close to Chingola, on the border of the Congo. And from there, we learned to buy acid and pour it into the product to realize its value. So free trade, the challenges that face free trade or trade is knowledge. Very few entrepreneurs in business in Africa, trading in Africa, really want to share some of those secrets with you. The other major issue we had is infrastructure ownership. There is no storage, bulk storage in petrochemicals that is in the hands of black female in this country and a better part of Africa. And the day we manage to get that right, the day we manage to get ownership levels right, not just leasing, is the day in which we will be able to resolve some of the security, energy crisis that we face in the country and better part of Africa. So it is also about ownership, cultivating proper ownership, and then giving it to people that have proper governance. So I'm not just saying hand out concessions or hand out lease agreements. No. Give it to people that really know what they're doing. The next aspect of it, which still plagues a lot of businesses on the trade side, is obviously funding. Do you know how difficult it is to raise a financial instrument if you're a woman in this country? It is near impossible. And I've been a trader now for 15, 16 years, a strong petroleum trader. But every bank that I go to, still, I'm doubled in terms of risk. I'm still looked at risky. And I've taken this to the highest possible levels in the banking sector. And now I've started to wage a war. I've decided that we've had enough as women. We should not be viewed as higher risk traders. We know what we're doing, and we've been doing it solid. We've got a great history. So in as much as they say women have arrived, quite right, we're at the door. But whether we've been given a seat at that table is a whole new question. Now I say it's time that we go out and build our own table.
Great. I like that. It's time that women go out to build their own table. I'd like to ask more direct questions now to individual members of the panel, and I'll just go through them. I'm going to start with Lucia. What specific benefits do you foresee from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area for both small businesses and larger corporations? And Lindiwe, your question is, since January 2021, the agreement for AfCFTA was finalized. However, we haven't seen tangible, impact in this regard. So what are the main challenges in implementing the AfCFTA, and how can these be overcome to ensure that the benefits are realized equitably across the member states? And to Darius, my question is, the priority sectors for industrialization under AfCFTA are automotives, pharmaceutical, transport, and logistics, as well as agribusiness. Is it generally expected that special economic agreements and zones will play a prominent role in future industrialization plans for these state parties? And how can the AfCFTA be leveraged to create sustainable job opportunities, particularly for the youth and women across Africa? That special economic agreements and zones will play a prominent role in future industrialization plans for these state parties, and how can the AfCFTA be leveraged to create sustainable job opportunities, particularly for the youth and women across Africa?
That's a long question.
Yeah. Can I take the women part and he can take the rest?
I think it's fair. We'll split it. Pria will take the woman part, so you can focus on the first part, which is the automotives, the pharmaceutical, transport, and logistics aspect.
I got your back, DP World.
Let's start with Lucia. I'll just repeat your question. What specific benefits do you foresee from the AfCFTA for both small businesses and larger corporations?
So wealth creation is number one, and I'll give an example. The way I work is always looking for wealth creation or money making, profit, and also social value or social impact. And based on that, I would like to think of this example. We have started helping a group of women in Angola, a group of 100 women in a rural area, and they practice agriculture. And the goal was to help them create agribusinesses. 100 women, about 100 women. The issue, going back a little bit to talk about issues, one of the issues was they didn't have the land. They had to pay in order to grow their crops. And that was number one issue. So if we managed to help them grow their practice, their agricultural practice to become agribusiness, we would be able to actually trade between Angola and DRC, Zambia, all of those neighboring countries. And so we would help them create jobs, we would help them make money, we would help them in so many things. So that would be one of the benefits, specifically for women. And the second one would be just problem solving, right? We would be solving so many societal problems, a few societal problems. One, poverty. We would see those women immediately going above the poverty line. They would be able to get quality of life for themselves and for their families, for the kids. As a matter of fact, we were working with a couple of families, just a few families, paying for their kids' education. So it's an ecosystem that we're trying to build. We're still trying to build, but there's a lot of challenges so that they can actually trade their products outside of Angola with the right investment, with the right knowledge, with the right know-how, and with the right incentives as well. So those are two benefits that I can foresee immediately: the wealth creation and the economic development and social mobility as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sis Lindy,
Yeah.
according to the agreement, trade was meant to start in January 2001 already. What are these challenges from your experience from a political, policy, and business perspective, and how can these be overcome?
I think it starts with understanding and appreciating the agreement itself by each individual country, and then removing the barriers thereof. Because if you don't remove the barriers, you make it very difficult. You have a document that all heads of state have signed and all departments are busy with. And the fact that we have varying levels of our economies. I mean, for me, the second issue is the levels of our economies. If you take the trade between South Africa and Mozambique, I'm just making the example because I just came from there. And you have to take the policies of the Mozambican government and the Mozambican people, take the South African one, take the Eswatini one, take all those. You'll find that it took long to even come to the conclusion of signing this. Why was it taking so long? Because we each individually push our own individual agendas. National interests are very, very important. You cannot expect other countries to forget about their national interests. But when all is said and done, if we don't look at the bigger picture of the opportunities that are being presented by the Africa Free Trade Agreement itself, and you remove the arguments about each other, and for South Africa struggles a lot because everywhere you go, they say, you South Africa, you always think we are better. You South Africa, you have a better economy. You South Africa, we are this and that. Sometimes there is a big misunderstanding because we push a line that says we look at the broader African continent. And when you talk about Zambia, I mean, how many South Africans can stand up and say, I've been to Zambia, I've gone to the border, I've gone to whatever, I've broken those barriers yourself to get the women working? For me, is all those challenges are in the main based on the differences which we push forward as the differences and not look at those differences as challenges that we can be able to overcome. But the differences in our policies, the differences in our economies, the differences again goes back to understanding each other and appreciating each other. Those are barriers. Come to infrastructure, transport, timeous delivery of the goods. When the goods arrive at the port, the timeous processing of those goods. Just, I think, the things that we need to look at. And we must be very practical about this. Theory is fine, but we must start being very practical about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Darius, the
Madam Chair,
priority
can
areas.
No, I wanted to just add on before you ask me my long question again. I think, Sis Lindy, can I call you Sis Lindy? Is that fine? Sis Lindy, I agree a lot. When you ask the question, and it's almost quite a critical or a criticism of how long it's sort of been, the narrative is taken to get to this point. I want to share some interesting stats again about another region, the EU in particular. It took them 11 years to establish a common custom union, right? It's taken them 25 years to establish its own market, single market, right? Africa and AFTA is looking to cover 55 countries when it sort of really gets the wheels turning, we're looking at a trading bloc which is by far the largest in the world. It's complex with different governments, different regulations. It's significant in size. So I think I just wanted to add on to that point to give you context as to, when we have the narrative of why is it taking so long, 1st of January 2022 dates are being quoted. The reality of it is if we move from 16% to, and this is Honorable Wamkele's stats actually, 16% to 25% in the next 5 years, we would have done well, and anything more than that is an actual bonus. So I think I just wanted to provide context. All right, now back to my long question.
I thought you'd find it as a compliment that you have such a long question. You're in logistics, and you know how to, break things up and make sure that, they're in the right place. So this comes with the title.
Okay, let me give it a stab. So Madam Chair asked about 4 priority sectors, and we spoke a bit about that: agri, transport, automotive, and pharma. I think the potential for those sectors are quite significant. Agri and pharma I'm going to lump together because it speaks to a key objective of AFTA. So I'll get to that in a bit. Transport, the opportunity, and that's very close to our hearts, being a transport company. AFTA creates the opportunity for an additional 2 million trucks on the continent, 100,000 rail wagons, 250 aircrafts by 2030. It's 2024 now, right? So that's not far from now. And that's the opportunity it creates. Those 4 sectors, when you add them up, it has a potential of $130 billion US. Okay? Auto alone will grow to $42 billion in 2027. So those are just some interesting stats. Agri and pharma, one of the key objectives of AFTA is to reduce the dependency of imports on those essential services. So I think these are the sorts of interesting dynamics that AFTA plays a big role in actually facilitating and getting us over the line. I'm aware that we are running short in time, so let me ask my learned colleague on the right to comment on maybe some of the last part of the question.
Opportunities for women and youth.
All right, so opportunities for women and youth. I think that, first of all, when we talk about special economic zones, how many of us really know where they are and what they're about? It's pretty hard. I mean, a lot of that data, there's an overload of information. I think you could start at this conference by saying, okay, what is the important information and how can we have it as a central repository? A lot of barrier to doing business is because we don't have the correct information at the correct time. So for me, if we want to unlock the potential that Darius had spoken about, I think it is important then to have the right statistics, which he just gave us now. But I'm not too sure that it sunk into a lot of people. Because like he said, 6 years is, 4 years. 6 years is not, I can't count today. 6 years is not far away. But if you're talking about rail wagons, Transnet, let alone Mozambique, CFCD, none of them are ready. Nobody's ready, right? So there's an opportunity. Go out and get rail wagons. Or get involved in a consortium that does steel. Go and find out what it costs to do rail brakes. I'm telling you now, there's a lot of money in wagons for braking. Go and look at lubricants. I sell them. Come and ask me. There's a lot of money in that. So it's about understanding what is happening around you in Africa and where the opportunity is. But make no mistake, it's not about a quick buck. It's about then leaning on women like me that have done it and saying, okay, Pria, we do not want to pay the same school fees you paid. What can you do to empower us? Where can we learn from you? And if not, point us in the right direction. I mean, I have to tell the story. When I first did my trade deal in Africa, it was with Zimbabwe. Ask me where I met them. I met them at an international trade conference in India. Now, why do we have to wait to go to India to do a trade deal in Africa? And India is still growing at the most rapid rate. I've seen it today. I was flabbergasted. And the reason they're doing it is because they're able to take Africa and unleash the potential in Africa, in India. We need to bring it back home, guys. We can do it here. Those kind of trade deals need to happen in rooms like this with us and our people. Thank you.
Great. I think just in closing, I'm going to ask the panel, bringing it back to, partnerships with purpose, tying it back to Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. What's the practical advice that you'd give in like 2 minutes for next steps? Because this is a social impact summit. So what are the next steps that you'd recommend? I'll start with Lucia, and then we'll go around in just 2 minutes if you can summarize.
Yes. Well, I'm building, like I said initially when I made my introduction, I'm building a SaaS platform to help those who do good work, who are actually trying to make a real change, to help them measure impact. This is very important. I believe it is very important because we can adopt and adapt those sustainable development goals, but if we don't bring data, if we don't actually account for them, it's hard for us to see whether the needle is moving or not. So one of the recommendations that I would leave here is measure your impact. Establish a workflow, a structure that you will be able to, with transparency and effectively, show the changes that you are making. So that would be my recommendation here.
Thank you, Lucia.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we need to be inclusive, and we need to be able to break down the inclusion that we are talking about. Without this inclusion, economic, political inclusion, social inclusion, there'll be too many people that are left behind, and then when they stand up and rise up, we'll be surprised why they're doing that. My view is that we must really focus on the key and strategic issues that are facing our people, that is related to economic factors, poverty, employment, labor, income inequality, access to resources. We need to find ways and means as to how do we structure these discussions in such a way that they are understood and appreciated by most. That's where. And then you also have the social factors, which are also very important: education, skills, health, well-being, social cohesion. From a South African perspective, this issue of social cohesion is very, very critical, and I think we're not giving it as much attention as we are supposed to. And then, of course, for me, it's about the political factors, governance and good governance, and building institutions of governance so that people feel they have institutional recourse across the board. I'm hoping that coming out of this is the first, isn't it? This is the first of its kind. I think once you get the report, you then need to come back and focus on the most impactful things that need to be done. And don't take too long. I know it's difficult to keep having these summits, but also look for the real practical things that you can talk about. We were here. We spoke about this. Look at the things that we have done, and therefore look at the impact that has come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'll follow on, and I like the message around being practical. When we look at agreements like AFTA and the UN Sustainability Development Goals and the Vision 2030, how can we be practical? I'll use a practical example. I previously spoke about converting more road volumes to rail. It has a direct impact on carbon emissions. But I want to, and really as a piece of advice, understand in detail. I like the comment earlier around we actually need to take hold of these opportunities, develop a deep understanding of what the actual gaps are. And with AFTA, for example, understanding how something like the rules of origin work and how that will stimulate manufacturing on the continent and then have a byproduct of more jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's about taking certain nuggets, develop a deep understanding, don't expect those opportunities to come through to you because they're not owed to you, and then leverage it's a lot of opportunity. Those are massive numbers, but those numbers don't materialize unless you actually take action. And my advice is understand first.
So my first advice is be fearless and be bold. If you're going to make a difference, then you've got to understand, you've got to follow it through. And what that means for me essentially is that there's so many trade and investment hubs, whether you're sitting in Ghana, whether you're sitting in Zimbabwe, or you're sitting in South Africa. Connect, again, the dots. Connect each trade and investment promotion center, get registered with them. It's not just enough to have policies and reforms and talk shops. You have to do the hard work. When you come here, you're coming in with your business idea and then you're looking for solutions or answers from us. You can't come in and ask us, what should I trade in? You should already know that before you get here. And what I can tell you is, if you want to reduce your school fees, if you want to reduce the time in terms of regulating your business, then this is the kind of platform you will come to. So what I want to offer is, going forward, if you want a help desk set up from the summit, where us as leaders still are able to feed into it when there's questions raised, we're happy to support. But women specifically, I am begging you to change your thinking. Do not plead any longer. You need to be firm and you need to be confident in what you request. And people and I'm telling you, I'm very impressed with DP World today when I saw their monitoring and performance too. Clearly, they're just not paying lip service to socioeconomic reform and transformation. They've measured it. They've shown us their tool. There's a lot more companies out there that also have the kind of budget and support. Go out and find them. Thank you.
Great. A round of applause for our panel. Our key takeaways is measuring the impact, inclusion and breaking it down according to the different factors, focusing on the key and strategic issues facing our people, practicality in terms of identifying the gaps and embracing the opportunities, and finally, being fearless and bold and being able to connect the dots also in a practical way by visiting some of the investment hubs and turning that into tangible business opportunities. Although our panel is going to eat their food, they don't bite. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance for question and answers, but if you do have something you want to say to the panel or ask them, please do that during lunch. I will now hand over to the facilitator for the last session.